Did I do something wrong? My wife's money is my money, right? Husband said, laughing. Emily is narrow-minded, she laughed along. Despite having tried my best as a wife, this is how I'm treated. Normally, it's not acceptable to use someone else's things without permission. Moreover, the amount of money they spent was huge. It was clear how difficult things would become from now on. What nonsense about, my wife's money is my money. What nonsense about being narrow-minded. It's wrong to be nice to these people. I'll make them fall into hell. So they can never climb back up, I'll push them to the very bottom. My name is Emily, a 45-year-old housewife. I live with my husband. My father-in-law passed away early, and my mother-in-law lives alone. Concerned for her, we decided to live near my husband's family home. I was against living here because of my husband's commute and, more importantly, because I didn't want to associate much with my mother-in-law. However, my husband insisted. I'm worried about Mom. And when he ran out of patience with my refusals, he even went to my parents' house. He told them about my inconsiderate behavior towards my mother-in-law and that he hadn't expected that I was this kind of wife. My parents then told me that I should take care of my mother-in-law's household. At least for appearances. My parents are still healthy, and my father is still working. As the owner of a company, my father has made it inevitable that my husband will take over. And maybe that's why they get along so well. My father praised my husband working at his company for training, saying, he's a very serious young man, but at home, my husband showed no signs of that. All the housework is left to me, and he doesn't even bother to take his dishes to the sink after meals. After he eats and bathes, he just goes straight to sleep. We couldn't even maintain a proper married life, and within a few months of marriage, we had to sleep in separate bedrooms. I've lived to this day without finding any value in being a couple. I've talked to my parents about my husband, but he acts like a good person in front of them. So no matter how much I talk about his sloppiness, they don't believe me. I was desperate every day because I thought that if things stayed as they are, the company my father runs would soon falter if my husband took over. My husband is not my only problem. My mother-in-law is also a source of stress for me. Since we started living near my husband's family home, my husband has said, make sure to visit Mom frequently. Apparently, my mother-in-law has a bad back. And it seems difficult for her to shop and do household chores alone. When I suggested hiring a helper, he replied, why hire someone when we have people who can do it without costing money? Showing his stingy side. It's not like I want to look after my in-laws for free. Moreover, my mother-in-law is quite a piece of work. A typical troublesome mother-in-law who complains about everything I do. When I clean, she tells me to redo it because there is still dust left. If I cook, she throws it away, saying to remake it because she doesn't like the taste. When I do laundry, she gives me nonsensical orders to wash each item by hand with care. The washing machine isn't for you to use. You are a daughter-in-law. Wash everything by hand with care. When I tried to use the washing machine and was scolded like that, I was truly astounded at what she was saying. My mother-in-law can't stand the thought of me having it easy. And if I neglect the household chores of my in-laws' home or try to use time-saving techniques, she yells, don't be lazy, and forbids that method. Really, when I came as a bride, there was none of this. Brides these days really have no grit. Watching my mother-in-law trying to resolve everything with a philosophy of grit, I felt she was so outdated. She lived in a different time and tries to impose that way of life on me, who lives in the present, trying to inflict the same hardships she endured. I had always felt that she was truly a person with a bad character. And I dreaded the time I had to spend with such a mother-in-law. To reduce the number of days I had to visit my in-laws' house, I diligently did their household chores every time I went. And I didn't even rebel when she complained. I'm sorry. If I just quietly apologized to her, it would not rub my mother-in-law the wrong way. In addition to my husband, I had to put up with the troublesome person that was my mother-in-law. Every day was truly a struggle, and it was unbearable. One day, as usual, on my way back from my in-laws' house on my husband's orders, I suddenly felt something was off with my finger. When I looked at my finger, realizing the usual sensation was missing, I noticed that my wedding ring was gone. Trying to recall when I last saw it, I remembered taking it off to prepare dinner for my mother-in-law. I must have forgotten to put it back on after leaving it there. In a panic, I went back to my in-laws' house and explained the situation to my mother-in-law to let me in, but the ring was not where I remembered leaving it. "Mother-in-law, have you seen my ring here?" When I asked, my mother-in-law said, "No, it wasn't here." That couldn't be. If my memory was correct, it should be right there. Noticing that my mother-in-law's eyes were darting around, I sensed something was being hidden. "May I search the house since it's not here?" I asked, but my mother-in-law replied in a panic. "No, that's not allowed. It's a violation of privacy." It was clear that there was something she was troubled about being found if the house was searched. Yet, she claimed to not know where the ring was. In the end, I couldn't get permission from my mother-in-law that day, and was unable to search for the ring. And to make matters worse, my mother-in-law had contacted my husband to tell him the ring was lost. As soon as I got home, my husband, red-faced, berated me. "Is it true you lost the ring?" I desperately explained that it must be in the in-laws' house and that I wanted to search for it. But my mother-in-law would not allow it, yet my husband furiously accused me. "Are you blaming my mother?" and wouldn't listen to my side. "It definitely is at the in-laws' house. My mother-in-law has it. Even though I have this certainty and I've told him I will surely find it," my husband, possibly upset about the lost ring, lashed out at me with cruel words like, "You're a failure of a wife," or "You lack the awareness of being a wife." Saying things like that won't change that the ring is lost. "If it bothers you so much, help me look for it." Reaching my limit after being repeatedly scolded, I protested. And then my husband's face turned even redder as he yelled, "How dare you speak like that when you've lost it? You really are the worst wife. You can't even respect your own husband." After that, my husband even went as far as to contact my parents. However, when I explained the situation to my parents, they said, "We believe that Emily would never do such a thing," which gave me a little bit of encouragement. I am absolutely sure that my mother-in-law is involved in this. I have to prove it. Since that day, I've been desperately searching for the ring, but in the end, I couldn't find it. Then one day, my husband was supposed to go on a business trip for a week. While it's not uncommon for him to go on business trips, that day he said something unexpected. He told me that I don't need to take care of my mother-in-law while he is away on his trip. Even when I asked why, he just said, "I have my reasons," and nothing more. Although I suspected there was a hidden agenda, the thought of finally having some free time made me decide not to worry about it anymore. After my husband left for his trip, I spent time with friends I hadn't seen in a while and visited my parents, enjoying my life away from my husband and mother-in-law. Then one day, my father told me, "I can't find my card." Apparently, his gold card had been missing for a few days. Losing a card is a serious matter. I thought I had to contact the credit card company immediately. But then my phone rang with a call from my husband. "Hello? I'm actually a bit busy right now." "What's up?" "Emily? Guess where we are?" "We're in Hawaii." My husband laughed heartily. In the background, I could hear my mother-in-law's voice. I realized then that my husband had lied to me about going on a business trip, and had actually taken my mother-in-law on a trip to Hawaii. "Emily, you're really careless. Leaving your card out in the living room like that." Confused by what my husband said over the phone, I tilted my head. "After all, I don't even have a card." "What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. It's the gold card that was left in the living room. I've already spent $20,000 with it." "Really, thanks to the president's daughter." I felt the blood drain from my face at his words. Struggling to keep my voice steady, I informed my husband. "You shouldn't be using that." Annoyed by my response, he yelled, "Don't talk back to me," and hurled more terrible words at me. Did I do something wrong? A wife's money is my money, right? I could hear my mother-in-law saying, "Well said," on the other side of the phone. Then the phone was passed to my mother-in-law, and she said this. "Thank you for taking such good care of me, Emily. I am so happy right now." She laughed loudly and mockingly. Faced with their malevolence, I could only despair. No matter how much I tried to persuade them, they wouldn't listen at all. Firmly believing they were in the right. Feeling that the situation was hopeless, I decided to confront them with the truth. May I ask, whose credit card is that?" Upon my question, my mother-in-law tilted her head in confusion. When my husband checked, he saw my father's name. Father-in-law's. My foolish husband apparently hadn't checked the cardholder's name. That gold card belongs to my father. He said it was lost, and he's been troubled by it. If it's there, that's a relief. I'll tell him to cancel the card. While I was calmly reporting this, I could hear my husband panicking. "Are you serious?" It was clear that if this came out, he would face my father's wrath. "Please, I'm begging you. Talk to your father and cover for me. If this gets out, my position is in jeopardy too." Before he even apologized, he begged me, and I immediately answered, "No." My husband was desperate, pleading, "Please, somehow." But in the end, this situation was the result of his own doing. "Emily, please stop tormenting my son. You are really a nasty person." Worried about her son's apparent depression or perhaps not liking that I was in a position of power, my mother-in-law snatched the phone from my husband and yelled at me. "What grudge do you have against my son? He was just trying to take care of me. It was also a good chance for you to be filial, wasn't it?" Mother-in-law who are blind to their own faults insists that they are not to blame. I felt a certain cleanliness in her attitude. For now, I will have to report this to my father. I am not in a position to hide such things. Please convey to your son that he will probably hear from my father later, and good luck. Saying that, I hung up the phone. Even until the end, my mother-in-law was shouting, "Wait." But such things were no longer a threat to me. I immediately contacted my father afterward and informed him about my husband and mother-in-law using the card to make $20,000 worth of purchases, and how they showed no remorse, which infuriated my parents. Surely, when they return to the country, they will face a terrible fate. I eagerly awaited the scheduled return day, enjoying the remaining days without my husband and mother-in-law. As soon as my husband and mother-in-law returned, they kneeled before me. "I am really sorry. Please, just don't report this to my father-in-law. Emily, I am really sorry." I didn't understand the gravity of the situation. My husband and mother-in-law tearfully apologized. It was clear they feared worsening relations with my father. I made them lift their heads once to show them something on my smartphone screen. It was a product page on a flea market app. There, a familiar ring was displayed. My wedding ring. A friend of mine found it. They asked me if this wasn't my ring. How could something that was supposed to be lost be listed like this? As I asked, my mother-in-law's face turned pale. Confused, my husband tilted his head. Actually, there were other things that were lost as well. Cosmetics, accessories, things like that. All of them were being sold by the owner of this account. Why does the owner of this account have things that I've lost? Perhaps my husband had some idea when he looked at his mother with suspicion and said, "Mom." "Yes." It was me. She raised her voice, unable to escape reality and lie any longer. "A daughter-in-law's things are mine. What's wrong with taking them and selling them? Isn't it just making good use of them?" I just sighed at her brazenness. The mother-in-law was truly despicable. There's no excuse for selling other people's things. I'll be filing a police report on this. This conversation is being recorded, so it will serve as ample evidence. As soon as the word police came up, the mother-in-law began to panic. As if to help his mother, my husband shouted at me, calling the police is going too far. Too far? I don't think so. You, mother-in-law, have stolen and sold so many of my belongings, turning them into money for yourself. So you both are thieves, I added, and both my husband and mother-in-law were furious. But my revenge wasn't over yet. The last guest was still to come. The doorbell rang, announcing a visitor, leaving the two confused people behind. I invited into our home the person I had called for this very reason. Hello, it's been a while. Entering the house was my father. He had had a whopping $20,000 spent without his permission because of this incident. I thought it was time to have a proper discussion about it. Seeing my father, my mother-in-law and husband started to tremble. And then, they knelt down again. I am truly sorry. If I had known it was my father-in-law's card, I would never have done such a thing. Please forgive me. As my husband spoke, my father responded. So, if it was my daughter's property, you wouldn't have hesitated to use it? It's not good to steal from others and talk like that after the fact. After being spoken to harshly by my father, my husband fell silent. My son was just trying to be nice to me. That's all. Please, I beg you, forgive us. The mother-in-law pleaded with tears, trying to evoke sympathy. I cannot bring myself to forgive you for trying to find happiness by stealing from others. This incident has caused significant loss, and I will be claiming all of it. Their faces twisted at my father's words. They seemed utterly devastated. I left the house with my father. I would likely spend some time at my parents' home. I began the divorce proceedings with my husband with the help of my father. I also filed a police report against the mother-in-law's theft. My ex-husband was in financial trouble after being asked to repay the money he used from my father's card and being sued for damages by me. As for the ex-mother-in-law, at her age, she ended up in the care of the police and seems to be struggling to repay for the items she sold. According to what I heard from a friend, both my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law were overwhelmed with debt and couldn't manage their lives. They had to sell the house they were living in and still couldn't pay off the entire amount. And now they seem to be living in a shabby apartment, desperately trying to make ends meet. As for me, I'm working at my father's company while studying business management, thinking of taking over his legacy. Since the divorce had left me with no heir, I decided to take over the company myself. My father and I both agreed that it was a good idea, since the idea of a female president is old-fashioned in this day and age. And he doesn't seem to care much about that. Honestly, working while studying is quite challenging. There are times when I feel that no amount of hands would be enough. But I am determined to keep striving in my own way.